Welcome to Sour SaaS episode. We're on episode 7, I think. Yeah, episode 7. This podcast is all about contrarian takes and bringing on operators who have been in the trenches and actually done the work to bring to you insights and knowledge, not just best practice, but actual validated insights that they've brought to the table. We don't do long intros, but to kind of lay the groundwork for this episode, something that has been a bit of a buzzword lately is go-to-market engineering and vibe coding. And that's fallen under this RevOps umbrella, which has been another term over the past 3 years, which has been deemed a fairy tale. It's either it's the most important thing on the go-to-market team or it's something that is like fairy dust. And so my guest today is going to help us unpack what that actually looks like in practice and why RevOps, why vibe coding, why go-to-market engineering is not just a fairy tale, but it's actually the foundation and the undergirding for the go-to-market team. And so it's my pleasure to have my guest on, Brandon Smith. And so Brandon, I'll let you do the introduction for yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Isaiah. I appreciate it. So I'm in RevOps. My title is formally Director of Revenue Operations and AI Strategy. That AI strategy component was added at the beginning of beginning of 2025, and has kind of taken form in bringing AI strategy and concepts into the RevOps world, into the go-to-market world. So I've been at a company called QuotaPath for about 6.5 years at this point. We focus on sales commission automation, and overall go-to-market compensation strategy and understanding the trends and what drives business outcomes the best. It's been a fun journey, still learning at this point, and just learning from my peers as well.
What was it like before? Because I think we've just recently in the past 3 years been calling it RevOps. So what did it look like for you before that 3-year period when RevOps popped off as a title? Yeah,
so I started my career in customer success. I was an entry-level customer success person at the beginning of my career, ended up managing a support team for about 1.5 years or so, and then made my way into what was kind of customer success operations. And that fell under the umbrella of what then ended up becoming revenue operations. And so there's what I think of as 3 different pillars of revenue operations. There's marketing operations, there's sales operations, there's customer success operations, and then there's sometimes collaborating with the finance organization as well, and maybe the engineering and product team too. But those 3 pillars are typically what I tend to look at from revenue operations. So started my career in CS, made my way into CS operations, and then went back, was our first customer success hire at QuotaPath. And then once there was a need for RevOps, I moved into that. We had a RevOps team. We brought in a RevOps leader who's still here at QuotaPath today. And that's kind of the journey, the evolution of revenue operations in my career and at QuotaPath.
Okay. Well, we don't call it Sour SaaS for no reason. And this really isn't even the first question, but you said some interesting things. And so while we have another pre-question, I'll let you pop one of these. Right. And so a question I have for you is number one, you said you came from customer success ops.
Yep.
When I usually hear RevOps, people are always fascinated on the first two, marketing ops and sales ops. Why do you think people don't think about CS ops as heavily in RevOps? And do you think CS ops is... how big of an influence is CS ops into the whole go-to-market structure? Like if somebody doesn't have a well buttoned up CS ops, can they still function as structure, or must that CS ops be there for the full unified go-to-market strategy for everything to work?
Yeah, I think it has to be there, and I think that's something that these are pretty sour. It's something that's popped up more recently as well. Is SaaS used to be growth at all costs, right? Mm-hmm. It didn't really matter how much we were spending. It didn't really matter what was going into the business structure, as long as you were selling, hitting new business targets. Yep. And then oftentimes what ends up happening is retention is kind of an afterthought. That's no longer the case. And so that's why there's more of a need for CS ops and focusing on our retention numbers, our upsell numbers. How are we, getting into the organizations that we're selling to, but then how are we expanding and growing with them as well, and seeing their success from them being a customer of QuotaPath or whatever organization they're at. So, CS ops, I think, is sometimes an afterthought for a lot of folks, but it is probably, in terms of having a successful business, it's probably one of the most important aspects of revenue operations.
Okay, this is also not on
Yeah, that's fine.
list of questions, but you're pulling me down this rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Because it's, an idea, a concept that I've been hearing in SaaS over a few years is that almost NR is the new AR,
Yeah.
especially for when we're in economies like this where
Totally.
it's a lot of hardship and less just liberal spending.
Yep.
So for you, do you believe in that statement? How important is NR now? Because it's always been a high growth metric, but
Yeah.
do you see it being really the new moat instead of AR, where everybody wants to go AR, like new acquisition? Like where are you seeing it?
Yeah, I mean,
honestly?
I think it's a give and take.
Yeah.
It depends on where you are as an organization in terms of where you are in revenue and like the maturity of that. For QuotaPath in particular, NRR is incredibly important for our growth. Like if we're not upselling in our organizations that are our customers and growing those, then we're probably going to struggle to hit our net new ARR targets and what we're telling the board of like what we're going to hit. So upsell is definitely a lever that is important to pull, and that then ends up kind of working into how the product is interacting. Like what from a pricing and packaging standpoint, how are we thinking about how we can actually upsell? Is it just user growth? Is it package growth? Is it cross-selling a product? And I think that's where things start to like hum and across the organization, and RevOps kind of ends up being a little bit of that glue of bringing those things together and bringing those organizations together. But it all comes down to good CS leadership, good account management, and good product teams as well.
Well, that kind of flows into finally the first question.
Yeah.
Finally, we got here.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have you eat another one
All
for this
right,
question.
all right.
So when people hear RevOps, they're typically thinking, and I've seen it firsthand in certain cases where they believe that RevOps is this, we're just in Salesforce, we're doing tech integrations, we're tweaking fields and building reports. Like it's this support role. But for you, I think you're a prime example of the claim and evidence that it's more than just a support function, that it is a builder, almost engineer of the go-to-market team.
Totally.
Can you kind of go into depth of why you believe that RevOps should stop being looked at as a support role, why it needs to be looked at as kind of the undergirding for the go-to-market team, and then what does RevOps actually look like in practice beyond just Salesforce admin hell?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that I have found that's been helpful in my career is having that foundation of customer success. The way that I try to approach revenue operations is our internal stakeholders are my customer. And so I have to be serving each of those leaders of those internal stakeholders and making sure that they're getting what they need. And it's not just, to your point, creating a new field or creating a new report. It's understanding their problems and then coming up with solutions to those problems. But also collaborating with those solutions to make sure that what you're building is actually going to be useful for the team, and being a little bit more strategic thinking in that. And that's where it's not just like, okay, I'm going to build this field and a new section to the page layout, and that's where they're going to live. That ends up not being super successful. I've lived in that before. And so what you need to end up doing is like just collaborating, meeting with these leaders and understanding this is the problem that you're trying to solve, and then coming up with a solution and making sure that solution ends up being what they were expecting. So yeah, I think it's systems, it's process, and making sure all of those things talk well to each other across the systems and across the processes from the different teams as well.
I heard a lot from the marketing perspective on how big of a shift RevOps is for the go-to-market organization. But if, let's say we have a Series B, Series C SaaS company doing millions and tens of millions in AR, and they have a faulty RevOps system, they don't even have a person over RevOps. What does that chaos look like inside the go-to-market team when somebody's RevOps system isn't fully flushed out?
Well, the nice thing is, I hope that is not something that I've experienced. I've only worked at two companies, but just with talking with different peers, like if the foundational data in your CRM is not good, the output of anything that you try to do with it is not going to be good as well. And so the CRM is very important. The data models that you're like in your data warehouse are also equally important. And then if those are all set up properly, you should be able to integrate to different tools really well, and start to like build with some of these new AI tools as well too.
Something I've seen firsthand was there was a lot of changing of leadership roles over a few years. And so everybody has a different attribution model. Everybody has a different system and way of working. And so when a marketer or salesperson comes in, more so a marketer, they come in to figure out what was the historical data. None of it is truly accurate just because of the change in leadership and the change of styles. How would, if you could be in a marketer's shoes, they're coming into an organization for the first time, how do you kind of stabilize or make sense of data that has been reported differently, attribution models are differently? How do you kind of navigate that?
Yeah, I think you kind of just need to audit what exists today and then try to put it in whatever format that you're trying to like end up getting it into. It could, like, if I'm a marketer, I would work really closely with the RevOps person that is your kind of right-hand person in the data structure and the analytics of all of this. If you don't have a RevOps person, that might be something that you consider bringing on as a right-hand person in this kind of exercise. But ultimately, it's taking what data that you have access to and then like trying to manipulate it in a way that or whatever process you have access to and try to manipulate it in the process or system that you're trying to move it towards.
Okay. And so bringing in a RevOps person, because sometimes people think that like RevOps comes in just to fix a system and then like they're almost looked at as a project phase role instead of an ongoing.
The RevOps person should be coming in to like build the system or co-build the system. And I say co-build the system of ideally the marketing leader, the CS leader, the sales leader has an idea of what they want. But the RevOps person will also have an idea, and then it's kind of coming together and getting to the point where like this is what they end on, and this is the system that they're going to be building off of for the foreseeable future.
How would you build a case for a marketing leader saying we want to bring in a RevOps person, not just for a 90-day stint to fix a system, but what's the ongoing need of RevOps beyond the initial fixing of whatever mass system problem they have?
Yeah, I mean, I think the marketing will have their own problems that they're trying to face. Sure, those problems might be able to get solved. Those initial problems might be able to get solved in the first 90 days. There's just going to be more problems that end up coming up. Not to say that like the RevOps person is only a problem solver, but if they're building it right in the first 90 days, there may not be as many catastrophic problems in order like that need to be fixed immediately, and that RevOps person could start to be a little bit more strategic and build out systems that maybe the marketing leader didn't even think could be built, or the sale like. That RevOps person can go give their attention to the sales team. Yep. That's the one thing about RevOps that can be a little bit challenging is there's a lot of context switching, right? There will be one part of the day where I'm focusing on lead routing, another part of the day where I'm focusing on AI solutions for our CS team. There could be another part of the day where I'm thinking about forecasting and is our team forecasting properly and our sales team forecasting properly. So there's a lot of context switching in RevOps. And so in the first 90 days, they might tackle the first thing. There's going to be a lot more things that pop up.
Okay. So I'm going to have you eat two of those at the same time.
Two of them, right.
So we're going to start talking about, because you're not just a VP or director of RevOps, but you're also AI strategy.
Yeah.
So now can you define, because I've heard many different definitions, but I want to hear from somebody who's actually in the field doing it. How would you define vibe coding?
Yep.
And what can RevOps people do now that they couldn't do before vibe coding was a thing?
So my definition of vibe coding, these are very sour. Two of them was a lot. My definition of vibe coding is more so like you can build with just a prompt. And so the barrier to build is a lot lower at this point. And where that ends up kind of falling into RevOps is by nature, RevOps people tend to be pretty curious. They tend to be builders and they tend to understand systems pretty well. And what vibe coding has allowed us to do is take that curiosity, that process/system building, and understanding how data flows, and allows us to create pretty interesting tools just with a prompt. But then also connecting different APIs and then allowing those APIs to do the work in the app that you're building. And so one example of this that we've built internally, we've built a handful of custom apps. One of them is one problem and the other thing I will say is I try to build with a problem in mind. And so that's what I would suggest when people are vibe coding, like come up with a problem that you're trying to solve and then build an app to solve that problem. So one problem that we have at QuotaPath is some of our prospects and customers prefer to communicate with us via Slack. One challenge with that is that Slack message doesn't make it back into Salesforce, doesn't make it back into Gong. And so there's no activity logging of any of that. And so what I've ended up building is an app that crawls a specific Slack channel, and on a daily basis, if there is activity in that Slack channel, it will create a record in Salesforce on the activity level. And I haven't gotten quite to this point yet, but get to have a bubble in Gong. That way our VP of sales or our VP of CS can see, okay, there is activity that's happening on this. It might not be via email, via call, via meeting, but it's in Slack. And so that's one example of taking a problem and using vibe coding to come up with a solution to that problem. You couldn't do that 2 years ago.
Right. Okay. And so another term that's come up within those past 2 years is there technically a difference between RevOps and go-to-market engineering?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of overlap. We actually just hired our first go-to-market engineer. And what I would say is the slight difference between go-to-market engineering and RevOps. I still think go-to-market engineering falls under RevOps, like the RevOps umbrella. There is a little bit more creativity in terms of systems, in terms of automations, in terms of messaging. The way that I think about go-to-market engineering, and Clay did a good job of kind of coining this term and creating this position and creating this role. So the requirement in order for us to hire a go-to-market engineer was they needed to be a Clay expert. They also needed to be an expert in some other tools that we use that are specific to outbounding and how we handle inbounds and how we follow up with inbounds as well. And so the initial set of problems that the go-to-market engineer that we've hired is coming in to fix and build upon is our outbounding programs and just overall like how we handle MQLs, making sure that we have a very good speed to lead and focusing on that type of stuff. And then as the go-to-market engineering role matures at QuotaPath, there will likely be introduction to the sales team of here's how we can better automate follow-up, or here's how we can better prepare you for your demos that you're having or your calls that you're having. And so I do think that there is some slight difference to RevOps and go-to-market engineering. It's just good branding at the end of the day is really what it comes down to. And so I think there's good RevOps people, there's good go-to-market engineer people. They have overlapping skills. It just depends on what problem you're trying to solve. And for us, that's why we hired a go-to-market engineer rather than a RevOps person. We felt like the problems that we were trying to solve, we would get a better applicant pool if we were hiring a go-to-market engineer rather than a RevOps analyst or a systems analyst, whatever it might be.
Got it. Okay. This question might be, you could be a little contrarian or give you a hot take, but how would you respond to a skeptic who says that RevOps people aren't developers, that the title is just hype?
They're correct. I'm not a developer. It's funny because there is a bit of imposter syndrome that comes with like vibe coding as well, where like I know what I'm building is most likely just a prototype, at least at this point. If it's good enough, we could start to build upon it, maybe bring on an engineering resource that makes it a little bit more legit. But yeah, I would agree with them that like a RevOps person isn't a developer. We understand systems really well. We can be dangerous with a lot of these vibe coding tools like a Replit, like a Lovable, like a Claude code, like the list goes on and on. And again, it takes the barrier of building way down. Right now, I would say what you're building is more like internal tools. I think we haven't gotten to the point where there are production ready, like, let's go sell this apps that are built via vibe coding. I think the prototypes are, but then you should get a developer to make sure that security all makes sense, that you're not being dangerous with the data that you might be like taking from end users, all of that kind of stuff. And so I think to the skeptics, they're right to a degree, but you could still build some pretty powerful things that are for internal use or, again, just a prototype.
Okay. Well, switching gears as you take 2 more of these, I know it's going to be a little painful this podcast. So you're at QuotaPath working on sales commission tracking and automation. So could you walk me through your actual AI stack and workflow? What's maybe your top 3 tools you were using and why? And then what problem are they solving for you?
Yeah. So the first one we've already mentioned.
You got a good poker face, by the way.
Oh, no. I'm going to need this water, actually. The first one I've already mentioned, it's Clay. We've been Clay customers for, I think for sure over 2 years at this point. We're probably getting up on to 3. And we started using Clay strictly for enrichment, really. And then we started to build upon that and started to use a lot of the AI features that they were releasing to power our outbound engine. And we're still doing that today. We're also using a tool called Unify that sits alongside Clay for us and does a little bit more of the orchestration of sends and allows our BDRs and SDRs to live in one place and execute those tasks similar to like an outreach or a sales loft. So we really like both Clay and Unify. A tool that we've also used for almost a year at this point now that's been super helpful on the sales side of things and the CS side of things is a tool called Momentum.io. What Momentum does is it takes information from your calls, from your emails that customer teams are having or sales teams are having, and you can point agents to write prompts to then have agents write back to your Salesforce and fill out fields. And so we've gone from there were probably 50 fields that reps were having to fill out on the new business side just to make their way through the opportunity as they progress the opportunity from stage to stage. And we've taken that. So it's 40 of those 50 are AI filled for the most part or automated in some way. And so what that has ended up allowing us to do is those sales reps are spending less time filling out manual notes in CRM, and they're able to spend that time working with prospects, working more opportunities as well. Our sales reps work sometimes up to 30 opportunities a month. And so they're able to do all of that, still have the context of these different opportunities that lives in Salesforce, and just do more. And that's kind of how I've framed the use of AI at QuotaPath is it should enable reps to do more and give them the tools that they need in order to be as successful as they possibly can.
Yeah, you answered some of the next question I had, which was a 2-part question.
Yeah.
How are you discerning when an AI tool is actually useful in RevOps versus what's just snake oil and what's just adding to your tech debt? And then secondly, how do you justify adding more tech debt for RevOps when you do need to bring on a big system?
Yeah, it goes back to how I approach vibe coding as well. Is we're trying to introduce systems or process to solve problems, and so if a tool that we bring on isn't solving a problem that's a large enough problem for us to be focusing on, it's probably not worth our time. And so we've looked at a handful of tools. Some are existing features that have been released of tools that we're already using, and have decided hey, it doesn't make sense to tackle this right now because it's not big enough of a problem. Whereas with Momentum, we knew that our reps were spending a lot of time filling out fields in Salesforce, they weren't filling them out sometimes the best. And so when they were passing those closed won opportunities to the CS team, those notes weren't good enough and the handoff just wasn't quite there. And so that's why we ended up pulling the trigger on momentum, implemented that pretty quickly, and handoff hasn't been as much of a problem historically now.
Okay. Switching gears, so you can take a sip because you can get that one next. Talking a little bit about your battle scars, what's the most expensive mistake you've made on a first experiment, whether that's a solution that broke, a tool that didn't work, or an approach that just created more of a problem than it solved?
Yeah, I mean, the experiments that I'm trying to do, for the most part, aren't expensive from a dollar standpoint necessarily. They could be more expensive from a my time or my team's time perspective. And so when I'm experimenting with new AI tools, typically what I'm trying to do is like either just pilot a system or trial a system, or a lot of these AI tools have freemium plans as well. And so where I've struggled candidly is I end up kind of spinning my wheels on something for probably a little bit too long, and ultimately it's a waste of time, which then is a waste of time that I could better be spent elsewhere. I try not to like have a lot of that make its way to my team, so I'm doing a lot of like my own testing by myself, because if it's my time, it's not the end of the world, but if it's our team's time, that's not great. I think one thing that is always a challenge for us is we're very inbound heavy in terms of our organization.
Nice.
And so making sure that any sort of change that we make on lead routing, on inbound demo booking, has to be done really, really well. And we just did a migration from one tool to another, and there was a lot of like time over a weekend that me and our director of demand gen had to spend time of making sure that things were buttoned up properly. And I think we only had like one or two missed bookings, and we ended up solving those. But like, it's being very conscious in when you're doing the rollouts and how important the rollout is to the organization as well.
Okay. How do you judge when an AI built solution isn't the answer and you need to go and actually have a developer solve this problem?
Yeah, so I tend not to pull in our developer resources because they're focused on building tools for our customers. And so the decision really for us is do we build it internally or do we buy a solution for it? And again, it goes back to how big of a problem is it actually? If it's a big enough problem that it's affecting revenue growth or a significant chunk of our reps' time, then that's when we would likely look to buy a solution, like buy a tool for it. If it's something that it would make the reps' lives a little bit easier, that's when that's more of a, okay, let's build to solve the pain, see if that works. Great if it does. If it doesn't, then okay, maybe we have to open up a search for an actual solution here.
Okay, I'm gonna grab another
All
one.
right.
This could be a hot take. You don't have to answer, but I would love to ask: is there a AI tool or AI capability that everybody's hyping up that you're like, man, that's overrated? I've tried it, doesn't work. It's more hype than actual functionality.
I don't want to get in trouble. So what I will say is it's very clear as a user of a lot of software. It's very clear when an AI feature is released as kind of an afterthought or as a check of a box for an organization. And so there's a lot of tools out there that kind of bolt on an AI solution and are like, okay, great. We checked the AI box for the year or the quarter. And like as an end user, you can tell when that's the case. And there's a lot of product orgs out there now that like are being a lot more thoughtful, and some are using vibe coding to like build the initial iteration of the product and then pass it over to the engineers where they can build the full-fledged version of it. And I think that's where like product management is kind of heading, and like using AI to actually develop really cool products. And they don't even have to be AI products necessarily, but it's really cool like how different organizations of a company are adopting AI and bringing AI into their toolbox.
Well, congratulations. You've just upgraded to the entire bag. So go ahead and grab the bag. We're in the lightning round now, so I'm going to ask 5 questions.
All right.
Each answer, try to make it 30 seconds.
All right.
So let's kick it off with the first one. It looks like you're ready. So what's the best AI tool for RevOps right now that's not ChatGPT?
Here's the hot take. ChatGPT isn't really the best tool for RevOps, I would say. I think the best tool, honestly, I am always super impressed with Clay. They've done a great job over the years of building a tool that's like, you just kind of get that like, holy crap moment anytime you're using it. A tool that I've started to try to bring into the fold a little bit more personally has been Claude Code. It's a little bit daunting to start, but once you kind of get in it, it ends up feeling a lot like ChatGPT, just like with God power. And so like I'm excited to continue to get my hands dirty with it, but safely. Like I feel like there's a lot less red tape with Claude Code, and so it's just being careful with what you're using.
Okay. Hey, next one.
All right.
This might be a bit of a backwards question, but I think you'll know how to answer it. So one RevOps task that should never be automated or AI assisted. What's the task that needs to stay manual?
Yeah, I mean, I think QAing what you're building is vital. Like you yourself should be testing exactly what you're trying to build from a feature standpoint, whether it be you're building a new Salesforce flow or you're building a vibe coding app, like testing that end case. That way you're not introducing something that like isn't great. And like sometimes AI isn't the best at QAing. I think the other thing is there's a human connection, right? Going back to it, my sales reps, my CSMs, my account managers, my SDRs, my BDRs, they're my customer. I'm not going to have AI do like user interviews for me. There's a human connection of like understanding the problem. Sure, I'm going to bring on my AI note taker and like have my AI note taker take the notes for me, and then I'll plug it into an LLM and like give the insights and all that kind of stuff. But there's still like there's value in human connection and like having people feel like their problems are being heard. And so I think that's always should be a part of RevOps, and it shouldn't be replaced by AI.
Okay. Next fruit, right.
All right.
So if you're somehow, don't know how this would ever happen, but if you were a RevOps leader who has never touched AI, or if you haven't touched AI yet or underdeveloped, where do you start tomorrow?
I think it's listening to podcasts. So like I think if they're already watching this or listening to this, they're off to a good start. It's listening to other podcasts that are out there in SaaS as well. It's like my Twitter feed is just riddled with like Claude Code memes and stuff like that. So I think over time, like as you kind of get into this universe, it all kind of ends up being all consuming, which is a good and bad thing. But I think it's just connecting with peers as well. Like I don't look to myself, like I don't look at myself as an expert. I am learning as every day goes on. And so I'm learning from my LinkedIn feed, my Twitter feed, seeing what people are building and shipping and doing all that kind of stuff. And so I think it's just making yourself open and having those conversations with your peers.
All right, next fruit riot.
All right.
You're on question 4, 2 more left.
All right.
So what's the difference between a RevOps person who thrives in the AI era versus one who gets left behind?
I mean, not to be like hyperbolic, but if you don't adopt AI as a RevOps person, if you don't adopt AI and you work at a tech company, you may end up getting replaced. And so I think everybody like has felt that or has heard that, but I do think that there is some truth to that. Of AI is meant to make you more productive and more efficient, and if you're not adopting that, ultimately you may be less productive and less efficient. And so I think it's trying to adopt new things, experiment, and like we talked about earlier, those two things are very important for a RevOps person. And so if you're not adopting and experimenting and being curious about AI, there's probably a bit of a disconnect there.
Got it. You think you can handle 3 for the last question?
3?
Yeah.
Okay. There's actually 3 that are stuck together.
Yeah, there we go.
So it's perfect.
So a hot take, in 3 years, will RevOps still be called RevOps, or will it evolve into something else entirely? You handle that like a champ.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I'm struggling, but it's okay. I think RevOps will ultimately still be RevOps. I think it'll be called RevOps. There might be an additional pillar, right? We started this conversation talking about the 3 pillars. There might be marketing ops, sales ops, CS ops, AI ops. And that's like kind of where things are heading for me, is bringing on these AI solutions and trying to weave them into these different those 3 pillars originally. But a lot of my time now is being spent on coming up with AI layered solutions to problems that our organization is seeing.
All right. Well, thank you, Brandon, for having you on the podcast. So, shameless plug. You could do a better job of talking about to me. What is QuotaPath, and where can people find you guys?
Yeah, so QuotaPath is, like I said, a sales commission automation platform. We work with really any company that has sales reps that earn a variable component to their pay. And we work with a bunch of different systems, so it doesn't necessarily have to live in HubSpot or Salesforce. Those tend to be our best customers, but we can work with any system for the most part. So you can find us at QuotaPath.com. I hope that some folks find us from this.
Okay. And what about you? If somebody has a question on RevOps or AI strategy, how could they find you?
Yeah, so my name is pretty generic. So I'm Brandon Smith. Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. I try to post like once a week, once every other week, related to RevOps or AI ops. So you can find me on LinkedIn. Just look at QuotaPath, and then you'll find Brandon Smith.
Perfect. Well, all right, Brandon, thank you so much for helping on the podcast.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Let's get you some water to flush some of these fruit riots out. And until next time, we'll catch you on the next episode of Sour SaaS.